Hey, what's up guys? RhinoRatesMusic here. So if you're here from my TikTok page, welcome, but if somehow you stumble across this video or this channel, I post most of my music related content on my TikTok page under the same name, RhinoRatesMusic. So in this video, I'm going to be getting my version of my music list week. So in this video, I'm going to be going over what I think are the top 10 best EPs of 2023. So 2023 has been a big year for music, lots of highs, lots of lows, a bit of a mixed bag, but as a result we've gotten a lot of great music in the process, but I feel like a lot of the EPs that came out this year have gone a little bit overlooked over some of the albums and hit singles that have come out, which I will be covering later this week on the worst songs and best songs, as well as worst albums and worst songs of 2023, but in this video I'm going to be going over what I think are my top 10 favorite EPs of 2023. And in case you guys are new here, I just posted a video on my TikTok going through doing an EP roundup for my final one of this year, my final video where I recommend some EPs and review these EPs, but I believe every single one of these EPs I have talked about in at least one of my videos before, so I'm going to be sharing them here, compiling them into a list of my 10 favorite EPs, so let's go through them. So first, I'd like to give a couple of honorable mentions. Firstly, to the new Angel Olsen EP called Forever Means, as well as the new Dev Lemon's EP, Delusion. The former, which is an extension of Angel Olsen's last album from last year, although this one incorporates a little bit of elements of jazz, and I think it's done really well and really beautifully, and the songwriting remains just as good as it did on her album. Whereas the latter, Dev Lemons, has been prevailing on TikTok as one of the best artists from TikTok lately, incorporating elements of hypnagogic pop, experimental pop, as well as some rock music. But this album, or this EP, is a bit more low-key compared to some of the other stuff she's released, but I think she does it relatively well. I just think that there are a couple of slight spots that kind of missed the mark just a little bit that prevented it from being on this list, but there are still some great tracks on there and still want to give it a mention. But anyway, let's get on with the list. So coming in at number 10 spot, I have the new EP from Japanese singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentals HARU NEMURI for Instant. Now, if anyone's familiar with HARU NEMURI's music and her fusions of shoegaze, noise rock, and hardcore, you'll already probably be aware of this EP, but if you are not, it is another collection of solid, hard-hitting, yet also not too jarring collection of noise rock tracks that also kind of have a bit of a sense of humor to them, especially the closing track. And just as much as on her last album, these tracks are all quite noisy, reverb heavy, yet also energetic and also fun. So if you like that, give this EP a listen, do not miss it. Coming in at number 9 spot, we actually have an EP that I only just came across recently and listened to, but I'm talking about the new self-titled EP from Smiling Broadly, an artist who has just popped up onto the scene on Bandcamp, hasn't got quite a lot of attention, but I feel like they deserve more. From their fusions of noise pop, shoegaze, as well as a little bit of breakbeats, but at the same time, the album still comes across as kind of raw, but also eccentric, and yet also well-produced, well-recorded, and the performances are quite sick on this EP. Even though it's only 4 tracks long, and the last track is quite short, I think it is still very much worth your time. Well, it won't even take you very long, but don't miss out on this EP if these genres really tickle your fancy. Coming at number 8 spot, we have probably one of, if not my favorite, hardcore EP of this year. It is the new EP from rock band Opus Kink called My Eyes Brother. So basically, this is one that was kind of interesting because if this was like literally 1 or 2 tracks longer, this would basically feel like an album. And as an EP, it is quite versatile. These tracks all sound different to one another. On this album, you're getting elements of some hardcore punk, you're also getting some sludge, and you're also getting some progressive rock, and also a little bit of jazz rock too, as the saxophone passages and the piano keys incorporated to this sound great, and also add more flavor to these tracks, and this track list as a whole, and the tracks meld into each other fairly well. There's even a track in the middle that's kind of an interlude that kind of splits up the EP, where the first half is more heavy, while the second half is a little bit more reverbed and a little bit more colorful, but still, this EP kind of rules and I highly recommend it. Coming in at number 7 spot, we have the EP from one of my favorite bands to come up this year. I'm talking about the new Geese EP, 4D Country, which is an extension of their album 3D Country, which will be talked about in a later video. But with this EP, if you're a fan of Geese's 3D Country, or if you haven't even come across the band Geese, but you're a fan of post-punk, you're a fan of alternative rock or alternative punk and alternative country, this is an EP, or this is an artist you really need to be hearing about right now. This EP, but if you were a fan of 3D Country, this EP basically adds on an extended version of the title track, which adds an extra jam section, which rules. Some of the other tracks on here, especially tracks like Jesse, sound just as out there, just as eccentric, and just as fun as a lot of the tracks from 3D Country. Just shows that this band have got so much in them, and I cannot wait for their future. If even some of the leftovers or some of the songs that didn't make it onto the album are still this great and good enough to make it on my EPs list, this is a band that I look forward to for their future. Coming out at the number 6 spot, it's actually going to be 3 EPs in one. It's going to be the new Quadeca Scrapyard series, 1, 2, and 3. I couldn't choose one in this one, and I feel like you got to listen to all 3 of these if you're a fan of Quadeca's music or you're a fan of his last album and want to hear the leftovers. But all 3 of these EPs do provide something a little different. The first one is a little bit more glitzy that you would have expected to hear from Quadeca's last album, and the break-ins feature goes down pretty well. The second EP is a bit more alternative, and the third EP is a bit more hip-hop based, but still incorporating some of the elements of folk, emo, and also a little bit of hyperpop that we saw on his last album. But nonetheless, regardless of which one of these EPs you listen to, or in what order, or how you want to listen to them, they're all worth a listen, and all indeed worth your time. And because of how good all 3 of them are, but also short, I wanted to include all 3 of them on this list, and not just one of them. Coming in at the number 5 spot, we have this new EP from an artist I just came across this year, this new Near Archives EP, Sunrise Bang Your Head Against the Wall, which, if you're a fan of UK garage, if you're a fan of drum and bass, if you're a fan of alternative R&B or hip-hop, or you're a fan of artists like Pink Pantheress, or you're also a fan of artists like Holly Humberstone, and you're also a fan of artists such as Hemlocke Springs, this is an EP you need to listen to. The performances on here are quite eccentric, but also come across as pretty accessible, yet also fun, and also catchy, and very groovy as well. The drums, the percussion on this EP, and the way it's all laced together within these very sticky melodies, as well as alternative R&B aesthetics, is quite good, and the sampling is also quite well done on this EP too, as are the vocal performances, and again, makes me excited for Near Archives' future. Coming in at number 4 spot, we have an EP that I didn't expect to rank this high on the list, or possibly didn't even expect to be on this list at the time I listened to it, but this EP grew on me quite a bit. I'm talking about the new EP from Chanel Trey called Real Cultural Shit. Now, obviously, if you've been listening to Chanel Trey and you like his fusions of R&B, soul, and dance music, this EP will probably be not too much different from what you're familiar with him for, but I would argue this EP actually has some of Chanel Trey's best songwriting to date, and some of his most cohesive song structures. A couple of these tracks are longer than what you expect from a Chanel Trey song, and are a little bit more amplified with those elements of electronic and house music as well. There's some house elements incorporated on this EP, and is really kind of pushing Chanel Trey's versatility and what he can do as an artist, and as a result, I'm looking forward to seeing how he can translate that onto a full-length album. Coming at number 3 spot, we have an EP that I thought for the longest time was going to be at number 1, but it's down here, but it's still awesome and still worth your time. I'm talking about the new EP from Alice Longyu, Let's Hope Heteros, Fail, Learn, and Retire. Now, aside from the name there, this EP is not quite as transgressive as you may expect, but even if that is the case, you got to admire some of the genre fusions on this EP. You're getting elements of noise pop, post-punk, hyperpop, jazz, funk, R&B. There's so much going on with this EP, and somehow Alice knows how to blend these genres in a way that makes them come across as quite out there, left field, but also not too cacophonous and not too rigid. It's an EP that's a lot of fun. It may not be for everyone, but if you can get behind some of the bangers on this, whether that may be Make You Love Me, or Hello Kitty, Going to Brazil, then I think this EP will really stick with you, and I think this is an EP that is a must listen if you haven't heard it by now. And again, an EP that makes me excited for Alice Longyu's future and how they can translate this music and these styles and these fusions into a full-length album. Although I do hear that their next project is going to be another EP, but if that's the case, I'm all down for if it's going to be as awesome and as out there and as experimental and exuberant as this one. Coming at number 2 spot, we have an EP from a band that's just started making waves this year from this project and is probably one of the most talked about EPs in the music hipster community all year. I'm talking about the new EP from Maruya called Noknaria. So for anyone who is a fan of artists like Black Country New Road, Black Midi, Squid, or maybe even Sprain, pay attention to this EP because some of these fusions of post-punk, jazz fusion, and chamber pop is quite insane, especially for an EP. All these tracks are quite lengthy that you would expect from songs that utilize these genres and are quite well thought out, well produced, well performed, are quite beautiful, but also dark, dense, intriguing, and exuberant, and the vocal performances are also really good. I think this band is almost prepared at this point to release a full-length album that can fully solidify them into this current scene and this current trend of popular, new wave, post-punk, experimental rock outfits like the aforementioned artists, and I think they can easily do that, whether that may be next year or 2025. The band can take as long as they want, as long as it's going to be awesome, if not even better than this EP, because this is a band to really watch out for. I'm serious. This EP almost made it onto my number 1 spot on this list, but it didn't quite get there. This EP that's at the number 1 spot, I had the most fun with this year. I got the most replay value out of. But the number 1 EP, my number 1 EP for 2023, has to go the debut project from Hemlocke Springs called Going, Gone. Man, what a fun arrangement of pop bangers. Every single track on here, all 7 tracks, are just some amazing fusions of synth pop, art pop, hypnagogic pop, as well as a little bit of hyper pop, not to kind of stereotype or categorize Hemlocke into this category of hyperpop that a lot of other people do, because I think she has so much more in her that excels her beyond just that basic hyperpop label. She basically incorporates elements of pop music that's popular in the scene now or that have been popular years ago, but incorporating her own little bit of fun in it, as well as a little bit of an artsy kind of nature to it, a more unorthodox structure, but somehow with all this, the songs still remain incredibly catchy, fun, exuberant, colorful, and very quirky, but in the best way possible. Is there anyone out there? Just one of the catchy choruses that is present on this EP. Despite only being 7 tracks, and despite the fact that 4 of the tracks we had already heard, 2 of which had came out last year, including the TikTok hit Girlfriend, which is still a banger, still hits hard. The new tracks we did get on this EP still slap almost equally as hard, and again, makes me excited for Hemlocke Springs' future. I've said that about a lot of the artists on here, but a lot of these artists are really coming onto the scene with these new EPs. Artists who are only just establishing themselves from these EPs, but artists who I also think deserve a bit more attention, because if you want to get into some more artists, or you want to be the one who's kind of early onto the scene or an early fan of an artist who could have so much potential in the future, then maybe latch onto them through one of these EPs that I mentioned here. Well guys, that's going to be it for this video. That was my top 10 favorite EPs of 2023, so tell me guys what you think. What was your favorite EP of 2023? What do you think of any of these EPs that you've listened to, or were there any EPs that I didn't mention here that you liked as well? Let me know, but until then guys, I will see you in the next video where we will go over the worst songs of 2023, which it's going to be a bit of torture, but we'll do it together, guys, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.